podcast is on analysis and interpretation of the financial statement. Analysis and interpretation cover two things: financial and non-financial. Many operating costs are fixed and therefore do not necessarily increase or decrease with revenue. This means that the operating profit margin may be more volatile year-on-year basis than gross profit margin. Be aware that many operating costs such as depreciation and impairment losses are heavily reliant on management judgment. This may hinder the ability to compare the operating profit margin of one company with another company. Third is return on capital employed. It is calculated as operating profit or profit before interest and tax divided by capital employed. That is profit before interest and tax divided by capital employed into 100. Capital employed is equal to equity plus bearing finance, means equity plus debt. Now, return on capital employed is simply written as ROCE. Return on capital employed is a measure of how efficiently entity is using its resources. Means how efficiently entity is using its resources to generate profit for the shareholders. It should be compared to previous year figure. Target return on capital employed. The return on capital employed of competitors, the cost of borrowing. So it is compared with the previous year with the target return on capital employed with the competitors' return on capital employed, and fourth, it is compared with the cost of borrowing. Now, liquidity and working capital ratio. First is current ratio. Current ratio is current assets upon current liability. The current ratio measures whether an entity has sufficient current asset to meet its short-term obligation. The higher the ratio, the more financially secure the entity is. However, if the ratio is too high, then it may suggest that inefficiencies in working capital management. Second ratio is inventory turnover period. It is inventory upon cost of sales and multiplied by 365 days. A high inventory turnover period may suggest lack of demand for entities' goods, poor inventory control. Receivable collection period. The formula is trade receivable divided by credit sale multiplied by 365 days. An increase in the receivable collection period may suggest a lack of credit control which lead to irrecoverable debts. Now, payable payment period. That is trade payables upon credit purchases multiplied by 365 days. This represents the credit period taken by the company from its supplier. A long credit period can be a good sign because it is a free source of finance. However, if an entity is taking too long to pay its supplier, then there is a risk that credit facilities could be reduced or withdrawn. Long-term financial stability. There are two ratios: gearing and interest cover. Financial stability means how much gearing you have, and interest cover is how much profit you are having to cover your gearing, cover your financial cost. So, beginning with the first gearing ratio is debt divided by equity or debt divided by debt plus equity. Gearing indicates the risk attached to entities' finance. A highly geared entities have a greater risk of solvency. Next is interest cover. Interest cover is operating profit divided by finance cost. Interest cover indicates the ability of an entity to pay interest out of the profit generated. A low interest cover suggests that an entity may have difficulty financing its debt if profit falls. Investors ratio is PE ratio. PE ratio is current share price divided by earning per share. The PE ratio represents the market's view of future prospects of an entity's share. A high PE ratio suggests the growth is expected. The calculation of EPS, earning per share, is discussed further in this podcast. The next topic is IAS 33 earning per share scope. IAS 33 earning per share applies to listed entities. If private entities choose to disclose earning per share, it must be calculated in accordance with IAS 33. The basic calculation is the actual earning per share for the period is called the basic earning per share EPS and is calculated as profit or loss for the period attributable to the equity shareholders divided by weighted average number of ordinary shares outstanding in the period. Profit for the period must be reduced or a loss for the period must be increased for any irredeemable preference dividend paid during the period. So we are going to deduct the dividend paid for the irredeemable preference shares. If the entity prepares consolidated financial statement, then EPS will be based on the consolidated profit for the period attributable to the equity shareholder of the parent company, that is total consolidated profit less the profit attributable to the non-controlling interest. The weighted average number of shares takes into account the timing of share issue during the year. Now, bonus issue. Bonus issue is calculated as number of shares, the bonus fraction. We will be using a bonus fraction in the bonus issue, and how bonus fraction is calculated as it is calculated as number of shares after the bonus issue divided by number of shares before bonus issue. If an entity makes bonus issue of shares, then share capital increases. However, no cash has been received and therefore there is no impact on earning. This means that the bonus issue reduces EPS, earning per share. For the purpose of calculating the basic EPS, bonus issue shares are treated as if they have always been in issue. The easiest way is to multiply the number of shares outstanding before the bonus issue by the bonus fraction. EPS for the comparative period must be stated. The easiest way to achieve is to multiply EPS from the prior period financial statement by inverse of bonus fraction. Right issue. A right issue of share is normally made at a less than full market price. A right issue therefore combines the characteristic of an issue at full market price with those of bonus issue. As already seen, the easiest way to deal with the bonus element is to calculate the bonus fraction and multiply this to all the shares outstanding before the right issue. The bonus fraction for the right issue is calculated as market price per share before right issue divided by theoretical price per share after right issue. EPS for the comparative period must be restated. The easiest way to achieve is to multiply the EPS figure from the prior financial statement by the inverse of bonus fraction. Now, the next topic is diluted EPS. Many companies issue convertible instrument options and warrants that entitle their holder to purchase share in the future at below the market price. When the shares are eventually issued, the interest of the original shareholder will be diluted. The dilution occurs because of the share will be issued at below market price. There is a summary of the entire diluted EPS. That is, share and other instrument that may dilute the interest of existing shareholder are called potential ordinary shares. Examples of potential ordinary shares include debt and other instruments, including preference shares that are convertible into ordinary shares, debt or any instrument, or even the preference shares that are convertible into ordinary shares. Share warrants and option means instrument that give the holder right to purchase ordinary shares. Share warrants and option. Third, employee plans that allow employee to receive ordinary share as a part of their remuneration, and the other share purchase plan. Fourth is contingently issuable shares issuable if certain conditions are met. So what are the examples? First is that any instrument or any debt or any share that is in future going to be convertible into ordinary shares. Now we are giving share warrants an option. Fourth is we are giving employee the option. We are giving allowing employee to receive ordinary share in exchange of their remuneration and other purchase plan. And fourth is contingency issue plan. If certain condition occurs, then shares have to be issued. Okay, when there are dilutive potential ordinary shares in issue, diluted EPS must be disclosed as well as basic EPS. This provides relevant information to current and potential investors. When calculating the diluted EPS, the profit used in the basic EPS calculation is adjusted for any expense that would no longer be paid if the convertible instrument that were converted into the share. Example, preference dividend and loan interest. When calculating diluted EPS, weighted average number of shares used in the basic EPS calculation is adjusted for the conversion of potential ordinary shares. Now, the next topic is in the analysis and interpretation is assessing the EPS as a performance measure. The EPS figure is used to compute the major stock market indicator of performance. The price earning ratio, or PE ratio. PE ratio is used to compute the major stock market indicator of performance. The stock market places greater emphasis on earning per share figure and PE ratio. IAS 33 sets out a standard method of calculating EPS which enhances the comparability of the figure. EPS has number of limitation as a performance measure. An entity earning is affected by its choice of accounting policies. Therefore, it may not always be appropriate to compare the EPS of different companies. EPS does not take account into all inflation. Apparent growth in earning may not be truth. EPS do not provide a predictive value. High earning may be achieved at the expense of investment, which would have a generated increased earning in future. In theory, diluted EPS serves as a warning to equity holder that the return on their investment may fall in future period. However, diluted EPS is based on the current earning rather than the forecast earning. And last, EPS is a measure of profitability, but profitability is only one aspect of performance. Concentration on earning per share and bottom line arguably detract from other important aspects of entity affairs such as cash flow and stewardship of assets. Now, the next topic is impact of policies and estimates. Accounting policies and estimates can significantly affect the view presented by the financial statement and the ratio computed by reference to them without affecting an entity's cash generation. This is particularly important issue when accounting standards permit a choice such as between a cost model or fair value model. Judgment is needed in making accounting estimates such as depreciation, allowance, and provision. There is no relevant accounting standard, although this is extremely rare. And the next topic is statement of cash flow. Usefulness of statement of cash flow. A statement of cash flow provides useful information that is not available in statement of financial position or statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income. There are a number of reasons why it is useful for the stakeholder analysis. Profit can be manipulated through the use of judgment or choice of a particular accounting policy, whereas cash flows are objective and verifiable. Next, cash generated for operation is a useful indication of a quality of profit generated by a business. Good quality profit will generate cash. Statement of cash flow provide valuable information to stakeholder on the financial adaptability of entity. Financial adaptability of a business. Cash flow information have some predictive value. It may assist stakeholder in making judgment about the timing, amount, and uncertainty of future cash flows. Now, the next topic to discuss in this analysis and interpretation is additional performance measure. Users of financial statement are demanding more information. In response, many entities present additional performance measure known as APM, additional performance measure APM, such as first is EBIT, that is earning before interest and tax. Second is EBITDA, earning before interest, tax, depreciation and amortization. Third is net financial debt, gross debt less the cash and cash equivalent and other financial asset. And fourth is free cash flow, cash flow from operating activities less the capital expenditure. Now, what are the benefits and drawbacks of additional performance measure? Benefits are helping users of financial statement to evaluate an entity through the eyes of management, means management perspective. Second is enabling the comparison between the entities in the same sector or industry. Same sector, comparison, same industry and sector. And third is stripping out element that is not relevant to the current or future year of performance. And drawbacks include every entity calculate additional performance measure in a different way year on year basis. Two entities might calculate the same APM, additional performance measure, in a different way. Entities often provide little information about how an APM is calculated or how it reconciles with the figure presented in financial statement. APM might be selected and calculated as to present an overly optimistic picture of an entity's performance. Too much information can be confusing to the users of financial statement. Giving an APM undue prominence may mislead user of financial statement into believing it is a requirement of IFRS standard.